their behavior too.
You hear that, Jimmy?
Yeah.
Talking about me.
Yeah, you.
All right. Okay, let's oh, there we go. We got sharing going. Okay, now I don't know how far along everybody is or how much experience everybody's got with CHIRP. I'm just gonna say that if you've got one radio and CHIRP works with it, you're gonna see a lot of CHIRP because of the fact alone, if you want to change a couple channels, you know, one channel is not so bad. You can get in and modify a setting, but if you got to do a block of CHIRP just makes it that much more easy if you know how to work CHIRP. So this is a conglomerated effort. You know, this is a year's worth of me and Ashley bashing our heads together and trying to figure out what we were doing wrong. As you can see, it's presented by your humble narrator, me. Next slide, please, there, Mr. Producer. I think I broke the system.
Uh-oh, he's fired.
Ah, there we go. Okay, like it says, this is what you'll see on the main page when you go to the little address up there, chirp.damnplanet.com. You can Google just CHIRP radio software and it'll point you to it. But this is going to be the first page that you see, and it's going to give you a basic synopsis of what to expect if you've never worked it. It'll also give you some tidbits if something has changed. If you want to check the roster right there to make sure that your radio is one of the ones that they've developed some translation software to, then you can go down that list. All right, next slide, please. And that'll be the screen that you get when you go to the download page. Now, yeah, it says get familiar with this screen because new CHIRP versions come out more often than Victoria's Secret catalogs, and they do. If you will notice, I worked on this PowerPoint a couple days ago, and it already had the April 6th update. So it comes out regularly. You will see this screen a lot, so get familiar with it if you want to keep your software up to date, which most of it stays the same, but they're adding new radios all the time. However, the Icon 5100 still is not one of the radios it covers, but maybe next time. Next slide, please, Mr. Producer. Okay.
I will interject. Always select the recommended one because they know your system.
Yeah, that highlighted bar will usually be the most recent that they've come up with.
Do that one. Yeah, do that.
Yeah. Now, there's two things to be aware of. Using the installer is easiest, but CHIRP does offer the files zipped up for in-place installation because this is open source stuff. If you get on their list, they'll let anybody hammer on it and do some development with it and then run it in a sandbox, send it back to them for pre-approval. And if the work you did was good, then they'll go ahead and integrate it into the one that comes out in the next 15 minutes. So, but like I said, you're going to see the self-installer and then you're going to see the zip file for in-place installation, but some folks may have need for it. I don't. Next slide there, Mr. Producer. Okay, and this is the software use agreement that you will click past with each installer update. Nobody ever reads it. I don't know. Maybe in the fine print I sold my soul 3 times by now. I don't have a clue. Anyway, this window here identifies the dump folder where the program is going to set itself up. Just like every other Windows piece of software, if you want to put it in a special folder or special file, you can do that, but you're going to start messing with where the new files start looking for their stuff. So, you know, if it does a registry update, yeah, you might have to do an uninstall and a reinstall. Or for those of you that have chosen to torture yourselves by using the previously mentioned zip files, this is where you would take them to expand them and overwrite the old files. But yeah, Lord be with you if that happens. Next slide, Mr. Producer. And hopefully this will be the green bar showing that it's being installed. It runs a little slow in the beginning, then it gets faster. But like I said, as often as these updates come out, you're going to see these windows over and over and over again. Get familiar, because if one of them hangs up, then you'll know something didn't go right. All right, next slide, please. And there's our famous finish button. If you click finish, you're going to close the wizard and the software will be on there depending on how you downloaded it. It may open it for you automatically. One thing to be mindful of, if you already tried to open it from a previous edition and it tells you there's a new version and then you go over and you download that new version, close that old one first before you open up the new one. Otherwise, it's going to tell you it's got more than one episode of the software running and it's just confusing. So before you try to open it again, make sure you close the original one down that told you there was a 5-minute update. All right, hit finish, which brings us to this one. Okay, now this is the recommended first step. You know, I actually had to go back and dig into the website a few times because people like Ashley and I, we didn't know what kind of radio we wanted. So we kind of went back and got one of everything. Well, I should say one of everything cheap. So I was making frequent trips back to the fact files to see which problems people were having with which radios, because I was having different problems. And then I would bounce it off Ashley, and he was having different problems from the different problems I was having. So anyway, this is the recommended first step. You're going to go up, once you get CHIRP loaded and opened up, you're going to download from the radio first time. Now, some radios got to have their volume set close to the mid-level. I don't know if it's a manufacturer thing or whatever, but it's apparently something with how they program and they swap data. They got to have enough of a circuit open on that particular inbound outbound thing to actually translate for the programming. So always download a primary file from the radio first time and work around that one that you downloaded. It helps to ensure that the created file that you make will be best accepted for upload and programming by the radio you're working. And it can get kind of confusing because, like with any other Windows-based software, you've got options for creating new files and new folders and everything else. But you want something that's going to talk to the radio that you're working with, and nothing is going to talk to it better than the file that's already on it. So
that's pretty big. I was struggling with this thing when I first did it, and that was what solved my problem, was that step right there. Download from the radio first, and then away you go. Even if the radio's got nothing on it, download from the radio.
Oh, you have to because there's embedded software on that radio that when you go back to upload, it will save you from taking a laptop and chunking it across your driveway.
I was close to that, actually. Yes.
You know how you used to skip rocks across the pond? Have you ever seen a laptop go across the driveway?
There you go. Yeah, that metal plate on the bottom made pretty little sparks as it went through. That was good.
Because I was fixing to do it. I was that close.
That was my problem right there. Yeah.
Which brings us to the purple line at the bottom. Personally, I always save that first downloaded file as I downloaded it. I don't modify it. I don't try to change it. I save that first file and I will copy it, or I will overwrite a duplicate of it. I always save that original file as I received it. Then I'll work on a completely separate copy. And I'll explain why here in a moment. Next slide, please. All right, this is the mystery window right here. Next slide, please. You must answer these 3 questions correctly or you shall not pass, okay? And I can't be any truer than that. Here's where it gets a little sticky. The COM port, hopefully, is going to be pre-assigned from when the computer first talked to the programming cable. Now, it gets sticky because each manufacturer and each programming cable that they use may have a different criteria for the order in which it gets accepted by the computer. And then you got to remember, there's like a dozen flavors of computers out there. Now, I have had to fight drivers. I have had to go back in and find drivers, USB drivers. I have had to remove them manually, one at a time, and go to a website called Mirkit, Mirkit, and use a recommended driver that they, thank you, Jesus, provided so that I could take it back and manually spoon feed it back to my ancient machine. And after the third attempt of a third different driver, it finally talked to the radio. Now, what I found out was this particular radio, and it's probably going to be hidden in the garblings in the manual, wanted to talk to the cable before I connected the radio. What did I do? I connected the radio to the cable and then plugged the cable in. That's all it took to turn my computer upside down. So read your paperwork. I know we hate to do it. You know, it's kind of like having to make 2 trips from the car with your groceries. Read the paperwork, swallow your pride, and figure out which way that particular radio that you've got wants the computer to either, I mean, your radio may not have a driver. So this is even more reason to check your paperwork. The programming cable may have a driver, it may not. The computer may want to talk to the radio first without talking to the cable, it may not. It may, like I said, there's a lot of variations, and getting it backwards, sometimes it's easy to start over and override it, get it right. Other times you have to spoon feed, and I'm trying to help everybody have to go through that. Okay, so when you get to this and you're downloading that file, start with the recommended COM port. Get in there and find the manufacturer, which they're calling the vendor. Get in there and find the right vendor. Then the model number, the exact model number for the radio you have. Okay, like I said, CHIRP is open source, which means programmers all over the world get to work with it. So there may be a United States version and a European version of a specific radio. You want to grab the right one, and hopefully you didn't get slammed with a European model off eBay or something, because it has happened. All right, next slide, please. Now, this is the original downloaded file from my QB25 quad band. And like I typed in there, you can see there's not much to it, but it provides the best file template to build from. If you get confused while you're working on it, the CHIRP website's got lots of facts and tips, but you may have to dig for them, and always start by trying to research your radio first. If you're having a driver problem, don't just wade off into it saying, hey, my driver don't work, or my driver didn't connect. See what the driver problem is associated with the radio you're currently fighting. And this program is a work in progress. People are developing and adding to it all the time. Hence the fact your updates come down about, let's see, it's almost 8 o'clock. We probably got another one by now. Looking up at this slide here, you see the 4 frequencies. It's a quad band, so they just threw one generic frequency in there to show me that it's capable of going 4 different ways. Woohoo, thank you, they all work. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, here we go. This is the same file after it's been adapted. For those of y'all don't know, there's a few of us here that are part of the AIRS and MCOM team, and they have pre-specified and predetermined the channels that we would be working from in the field. Any of y'all that want to know more about that, you're welcome to join us tomorrow night. We're going to have our AIRS Radio Net 1900 hours, and you can go to the club website and get all the details about frequency, and that'd be a good exercise on CHIRP. If you don't already have our frequency plugged into your radio, you can get on CHIRP and try to put it in there. But you see the little 88.5s, those are space holders. You see the little 023s, those are also space holders. So don't think you have to go back and change every one of those, because I'm going to explain to you here in a minute why you can leave them alone. Let's look at the down at the bottom of the columns that are specified. You see I got red and green highlights. It's because they use so many similar terms it can get confusing. You know, the word tone. How many ways can we use the word tone and have it mean something completely different? So the first column, you got your channel number. That's going to be the channel number of the radio. The next one is your receive freak. Of course, everybody knows everything is based off the receive freak, the main freak, and you make your channel adaptations from there, positive, negative, offset. All that works from the base frequency. The title bar is in column number 3. This is where it helps to know your radio again, because if you're going to have 50 or 60 channels in there, you're not going to have to wonder what number 7 actually is and then stare at that receive freak. You're going to want to put a title in. Well, some radios only give you 5 character spaces. Some radios will give you 6. There's other ones out there that are high dollar that'll pretty much let you string them out. But think about your title scheme. That some radios will keep you doing all capital. Some of them will do capital and lowercase. Gives you a little more flexibility. But title your channels so you know what they are. So when you look down at your readout after everything goes well and you get a program, you know exactly where you're at. The next column over is tone mode. That's telling your radio how it should use the subaudible or digital tones that you assign. 99 out of 100 around here, unless you've got a digital repeater you just have to get on, is going to be an analog CTCSS subaudible tone. So we're going to go over here in a minute. We're going to go over what the different terms are. But the next tone column next to the tone mode is the value for the subaudible tone that either another radio or repeater would need for your radio to transmit for it to hear it. That's where that number goes. Now, if you've got tones in and out on that repeater, that same tone, well, I can't say that because there are cross tones out there, but the tone value that the repeater's going to want to throw out that your radio needs to listen for will go in the tone SQL column. That's tone squelch. Of course, the DTCS, that's a digital code. That's some radios use an electronic variation to generate their tones. Unless you've actually got something that you got to work with, leave them alone. You've got no purpose for them unless you do have a purpose for them. You get in there and start moving stuff around, then you're going to tell the radio it doesn't quite know what you want it to do. Moving past the DTCS receive code, the DTCS polarity, because yes, some of these require positive or negative in order to hear each other. Cross mode, 99 times out of 100 on an analog radio system, you're going to leave it tone to tone. And what's going to tell it whether or not it needs to vary from that is all the way back in column number 4, the tone mode. That's why I always try to tell folks work from left to right. If you do go back and have to change something, if you miss something in a column that you've already gone by, make your change, go back where you were working, but keep an eye on that last column, because this software comes with pre-established values and it loves to jump back to them if you don't hold your tongue right. Okay, duplex mode. For those that are still fresh, you got positive and negatives in order to get the duplex, the offset for your receive frequency that you started with. You can see we got some in there. We got the negative 0.6 and we got the positive 5s, which is pretty much a standard for UHF and VHF. On this particular radio, and I'm saying this particular radio because other radios will have different acronyms for narrowband and wideband. Right here, the mode column, that's what my radio perceives as whether I'm selecting narrow or wide. And then power, of course, is radio power. The radio itself will dictate. Some radios have 2 power settings, some radios have 3, some radios have 4. You're going to have to look in the book for the radio to see what translates in. Like my TYT actually has 2 mediums, but you got to know which medium is the higher medium. So I have a low, medium, medium 1, and a high. The skip is exactly what it means. If you hit the scan for your radio, provided it has scan function, it will scan every channel unless you tell it to skip it. And on this particular readout, This is a frequency that we use for cross-banding purposes from VHF to UHF. And I don't want to scan that particular channel because chances are that's going to be another form of operation that's going to dominate. It might even be a subnet. And if I select to scan it, then my radio is going to get hung on that channel every time. And I'm going to have to try and press forward to scan the other channels. Hopefully that made sense to you. Now keep in mind, this is only channels 1 through 15. This does not show all, this radio in particular had 200 channels on it, I think. So that's just where I cut it off. All right, next slide, please. Okay, we're going to cover this and then I'm going to bring my special guest back on. This template here, if you look in the frequency, which is column 2, all 4 of those deal with certain things that I want to be able to do with the club frequency. Okay, and looking up at location 55, that's PC Amateur Radio Club. It's set for TSQL in the tone mode, and I'm telling it I want it to talk out with 100 hertz tone. I want it to hear with 100 hertz tone. We won't hear it. Okay, you will not. Well, if you do hear it, something's wrong with your rig, but you won't hear it. But the repeater or other radios would be listening to it. I ignore the DTCS because I'm not using it. I ignore all 3 columns, and I leave it on tone because I want the radio to know I'm throwing a tone out and I expect a tone back. All right. There's the standard offset. It's set for wideband, which is FM. If you're reading it right, I want it set for wideband, and I want it on high because these little handhelds, well, even my 25 watt QB is a 25 watter, so it needs all the help it can get. Now, on the next one, line 56, I've got this one set up for pure simplex. Okay, so if I'm standing within eyesight of Ashley or whoever, I know he's going to be listening for club repeater on that frequency. So if I can't hit that repeater from where I'm at, I can still talk direct to him and he can hear me, and I can hear the repeater. I just can't hit it because it's got a lot more power than I do. So that's what that one's set up for. Channel 12, same frequency. It's set for tone only. You'll notice a little 88.5 in the tone squelch area. I don't have to change that because I'm not using it. I've told the radio I want to throw my subaudible tone out to the repeater, but I'm willing to take any signal coming back. It's not going to have to be filtered because my handhelds, they don't have that great of coverage, and my antennas are not the best because I'm a cheap guy. So yeah, anything that happens to come squawking on our frequency, I want to hear it. If I need to filter something out, I'll bump my squelch up. And of course, I'm still ignoring the DTCS because I'm not using them. You go over here to the duplex. Now let's look at number 75. This is some radios, and if you look deep enough in your programming manual, that little pamphlet they give you, some radios have an automatic reverse circuit, and it's either a 1 or a 2 button process, and it will actually invert all of your settings for a specific channel. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you get dependent on your repeater, and there's 2 of y'all out there.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you had something to interject. If you switch it, if you lose your repeater, then you've lost the oomph that it takes to talk to everybody else. But if one guy is set up to stay on the repeater and another guy reverses his frequency, they can still have a 2-way conversation as long as they're reversed, one of them. Okay. So that's what I set that one up for. It is PC reverse. It's Panama City reversed. I've got it set for TSQL. Why did I do that? Because I know the repeater does have a tone whether I listen for it or not. The other guy may have it set that he doesn't want to hear everything. He only wants something to come through to his radio with that tone. Now, if he doesn't, his radio is not going to ignore me because it's set to listen to everything. But if he does have it set for tone, he's still going to hear me because I'm telling it I want to tone out and I want to tone in. So Anyway, that's it. That's just 4 different ways that the same frequency can be set up depending on how you want the channel to behave.
Yeah.
And you may get into an environment where one setup works better than another.
Botz, I have a comment.
Go for it, sir.
That line 55 is useful because, and maybe you were going to get to it, but it's useful because it will let your radio ignore someone on Fusion running digital, which if you don't have a Fusion radio, it just sounds like an awful mess. So
Like a buzzing sound in the
buzzing
background.
sound, that's right.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't have much experience with Fusion, and I didn't know that transmitted simultaneously. I knew we had a Fusion repeater, but I didn't know it was simultaneous on that frequency.
Well, if
That's
you
good
hear
to know.
a irritating noise on there, chances are it's somebody using the digital mode, one of the Fusion digital modes. That's not a bad thing.
No,
But if you did want to hear it, you can set up your radio like line 55 because when the repeater's on analog, it sends the tone out, and that lets your squelch. It lets the repeater into your radio. If it's not in analog mode, then it's going to ignore what's happening on the frequency.
Sounds good.
That might take a while to sink in, but
yeah,
helpful for our particular repeater in Panama City.
Yep, and that's good to know because I didn't know that we were running it, on that exact same frequency. I just knew there was one around here, but without the equipment to use it, I didn't really know what it was for. Okay, and let's go back over the list again. Under the tone mode, the radio sends CTCSS out. Under TSQL, it's the tone squelch. It tells your radio to ignore all signals except those coming in with the tone SQL tone value. They're usually identical, okay? Around here, everybody seems to like 100.0. Some repeaters or radios actually can be different. They're set up to do cross tones. One tone in, a different tone out. They got their reasons for doing that. But that would cause the tone mode to be changed to cross.
Oh.
This software is very flexible. If you've gone past those columns and you decide to go back to the tone mode and you change it to TSQL, and then you go back and you change the tone SQL column to any other value, it's going to assume that you're going to go into a cross mode, and it's going to change your tone mode to where it says cross, and it's going to go all the way over here to the cross mode where we usually have tone, and it's going to take the value that you just put in. Now, if you realize you did that, and it just changed that whole line for you, and you go back to the column that says tone mode and you change it back to tone like you wanted it to be, it is not going to go back and erase those values for you. You're going to have to go back and manually spoon feed it back the way you wanted it because it thinks the last thing it knew, you were going into cross mode. And at this time, I'm going to bring in Professor Ashley Wright with the Redneck University of Lower Lagoon. And he's going to explain to you some of the trials and tribulations that he has suffered with trying to migrate his files and software from an old computer that doesn't skim worth a flip to a new computer. Thank you, Professor Wright. Please join us.
I guess when our moderator gets back to share the screen, there's some things when you go into up in the top file and you're trying to upload or download and you have a radio, and if your computer is not able to talk to the radio or the radio is talking to the computer, again, you start pulling your hair out again. there's a lot of things out there that think they're Bowfangs. And then there's a couple of radios out there that think they're radio entities. You got to figure that out because you got to make sure that your computer and your radio are talking to each other through that programming cable. And then when you upload to that, then everything's going to be happy and copacetic and all that stuff. When you go and try to emulate a file, and hey, Greg, I need to share my screen.
All right.
When you go try to, let's say you bought another handheld. I've never done this, so let's see. Am I ready?
It's a work
Yeah,
in
go ahead.
progress.
You pick the window that has the content you want to share.
I need to go back to my desktop. What's a what? Huh? No, I don't have that many choices here.
All right.
Well, it says whiteboard, iPad, post attendee screen. What's advanced? Where's my desktop at?
You got to hit the screen button first, the green screen button at the bottom. You got to hit that first.
I did that. Yeah.
Well, it ain't working.
Yep.
We don't
Anyway,
have your screen.
nope. If you,
We're not
when you
working.
go, here, let me try it again. Share
Where's my
screen.
That's my screen. Okay.
I don't have that many choices right here. I got basic, advanced files, whiteboard, iPad.
Yeah, you actually have to have what you want to show already open.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well,
I think that works.
okay. I didn't know.
Yes.
Did not know that. All right. I'm too deep in. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I can't get it. Not really sure how to, I don't want to log out of here and come back into it. Well, I'll tell you, I'll try to.
There went Jim.
Yeah.
I'm here.
I
Well,
got Jim's screen.
I think I'm here.
yeah.
Oh, is that my screen?
Yeah.
That's somebody.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. How do I get out?
I don't
of
know how to, I don't know how to get out of this and go to my desktop.
I don't know how to get out of whatever I did.
Anyway, when you go, and let's say that you have a multiple radio, like you have two Bowfangs as an example, all right? And you go in and you want to, or actually, I guess the best thing would be what Jimmy and I did. How about that? I'm gonna take Jimmy. Jimmy, what's the name of your radio?
It's a TID radio.
TID radio. I'm over helping Jimmy, and it looks like a radio entity GA210, like what, or 510, like what I have. But his instructions said that it was emulates a Bowfang 5 UVR. Well, in the real world, maybe it did, but in CHIRP's world, it didn't. So it would not communicate. But it looks like a radio entity GA510. So what I had to do is I had to manipulate it, the radio entity, downloaded his 4 or 5 stuff that was into the program, and then I copied and pasted. Now, the big thing about copy and pasting from one radio program that you have saved in CHIRP to another one, you're going to start losing some values, and it's going to reset to low power. The TSLQ or the tone's going to be off, and you're going to go back and have to recheck all that stuff because it will really mess you up. And that's where the laptop going across the parking lot is going to come into play. So there's a lot of line by line. So if you have like 50 channels and you're going to copy that, move it over to another file and try to paste it, it's going to reset a lot of values. You have to go check that line by line all the way down. And it can get very, very frustrating. and it can be time consuming. So Aries, don't make any more changes. I have 7 radios. It takes a minute.
We only got 2 more changes.
Anyway, anyway, it's a good, if you already have a lot of frequencies programmed into one radio, because it takes time to go get all those and get them downloaded off of radio reference and off of query and wherever all your other sources, and you get them into CHIRP, and you're gonna go, okay, I got another radio. I'm gonna go copy and paste this from here to here. You need to double check everything, because if you don't, your power settings are going to be on low. The offsets are going to go from positive to negative, and your tone squelch is going to be tone to tone when you need tone squelch, or vice versa. And again, that's when you're sitting there pulling out what's left of your hair, and you go, wow, that driveway and this laptop are looking really good right now. Because you could spend a lot of time and frustrating hours, but it still takes a lot of time if you have 50 or 60 or 120 channels to go in there line by line. You got to highlight it, right click, open properties, and then go down and change every one and hit save. Next line, and go down the pipe. And it can be cumbersome. But if the alternative is trying to program these radios that aren't CHIRP by hand. So I guess pick your battles. So CHIRP can be your friend and CHIRP can be your enemy.
But the price is right.
Botz is right. I can guarantee I could probably go open CHIRP right now, and there's an update for me to do.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
That's all I got.
We're getting close to the end. Okay, you can see in that top corner there, that is one of the file blocks of information that actually come on board CHIRP. That's part of their reference material, is the weather channels. So there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of neat stuff that you can cut and paste and all, because it is Windows based. Just be careful how you paste it. All right, let's go at the top. Save your finished file. When you get everything the way you want it, and you don't anticipate any more changes, save it right then into a unique name. It's going to have a scheme of its own. It's going to throw a file name in there for the radio that you used and the date that you did it. But if you do 2 or 3 different files on the same day, then you may end up confusing yourself with which one was the best one you did. Don't count on just one file. Ashley and I have experimented with emailing. They're all CSV files, comma separated value, basic spreadsheet backbone, but how the radios interpret them is what changes. So he can't send me a CSV file and me just expect to drop it into another radio. I can't do that, because every one of them is different. But what I can do is I can use CHIRP to open the file that he sent me, and I can scavenge the frequencies out of what he's done that I want and open up a new window right beside it and toss them all in there. And I'll straighten them up later, but getting them over there is the lion's share of the work. Like I said, save that finished file. Always attach and detach your radio to the programming cable with the power off. Okay, it don't sound like a big deal, but if you've already got your programming cable attached to the computer, and now we've already confirmed the driver's doing what the drivers do. Okay, always turn the radio off, connect to the programming cable, then turn it on. Do your programming, whether it's up or down, turn the radio off. After you get confirmation that it's been programmed, take it off the programming cable. You're eliminating any potential for a bad spark at that point, because anybody that's worked around computers knows that's all it takes is a spark. If the software fails to upload the new file to your radio, remember that mid-volume level trick. You may have one of those radios that, unless the volume gets brought up to a certain level, it's not listening for anything. So try that. Some radios even demand it. If CHIRP fails to recognize your radio, this I'm talking like first time out, first go back to the website, check the facts page for your specific radio, see if other guys have had that same issue and what they've done that has fixed it. And I'm gonna say right now, 9 times out of 10, it's probably gonna be a USB driver issue, because you've got so many computers and so many versions of Windows trying to talk to so many versions of radios. And you can order a radio like it, order another one 6 weeks later, and it'll have a different level of firmware that will not talk specifically back and forth to the one that you just got 6 weeks before. So just be mindful of that. The programming guys that are on there, they're all about listing what they've accomplished. So I doubt you're going to hit a problem that someone else hasn't either had or tackled and fixed. So next line, you may have to use a different radio selection from the actual radio you have. That's what Ashley was talking about. He had a Baofeng specific model number. It didn't like that setting in CHIRP, but because he knew that the setup and the manufacturer were similar to the other radio, he tried telling the computer that that's the radio he had, and it worked. Sometimes it won't. But what does he have in backup? He's got that original file. He can always put it back like it was before he attempted his experimentation. Like I said here, most radio scripting is very similar. What changes is how it gets pulled down and fed back to the individual radios. Google and YouTube are your friend. If you don't have a lot of experience with CHIRP, or you're just starting out with CHIRP, or it's been a year or two since you worked with CHIRP because you put some frequencies in when you first got the radio and now you need to change them or you want to put some more in, yeah, you might want to check the Google and YouTube and see what changes have been made. Just at least get comfortable with it. I mean, don't panic. Don't feel intimidated by it. Just understand that a lot works for you if you know what you're doing. If you feel like you know what you're doing, you don't see these codes and think, oh, what does that one mean? If you were able to download the base file from your radio, you should not be able to tear it up so bad that you can't put it back like it was when you got it. And that's about the most comforting thing right there. Most of these radios, they come with a factory reset procedure anyway, but understand, if it's a Chinese-made radio and you hit that factory reset, you better write down the procedure for changing the language back to English before you do that. Okay,
Well,
just understand.
One thing in CHIRP as well, when you go, if you feel like you screwed up, go up to the top right corner, hit the X, and it's going to say save your data. You go no. That way it's going to leave it the way you had it. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, cancel it before you make any formal changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just tell it no, don't save the changes, and then all of a sudden you're starting all over again. Trust me,
Because
been there, done that, and I have that merit badge.
Yeah, it's easy to get confused when you start looking at, because this thing will let you open up 5 different windows of the same file.
Oh yeah.
So you can start plugging and creating a new file in tab 2 and think, well, can I actually get all these together? So then you move to tab 3 and you start plugging them in there to see if you can get your light channels all in one specific area. Uh-oh, that don't work. Well, let me try shaving a couple or moving them down. So yeah, you're going to be doing some experimenting. Don't save that final file until you're happy with it. And I would quite honestly say, change the file name and don't tear up the file that you just opened in order to make your changes to. That way, worst case scenario, you can always go back to what you had before you started. Okay, you should have also read up on the radio first, if for nothing else, and to figure out the specific recommended order for using the cable or installing the USB drivers in the right order. Okay, so that's also where you're going to find that reset procedure. But like I said, don't do it until you write the procedure down for converting the menus back to English or whatever else you can read. Some you can do French, you probably got a choice of that too. When possible, I use CHIRP software over the manufacturer's software so that I can stay familiar with it. I hate learning new software in every radio, although the terms are going to be identical. How they do them is different. CHIRP seems to be concise and precise. However, depending on the radio, you may have to at least open a file using the manufacturer's software to adjust some buried settings. Like my TYT, it had a firmware password because when we got it, this is where Google was a friend, because they had the bands in there, but they had them reduced from what we were allowed to operate on. But in order to change and expand the band settings in the radio settings, which some of these you can get that deep into it, I had to have the firmware password. That's where Google was my friend, because it wasn't mentioned in that little handy dandy folder they gave me. So I found the password, logged in on their software, got in there, expanded the bands to what I was privileged for, backed out, and then I went back to CHIRP and loaded my file up, and it didn't blow the settings, so that was a good thing. Don't expect any manufacturer software to read or open a CHIRP file, even though they're essentially putting out an identical substance. How they create them is going to be different. They're going to be looking for the same image values, but how they get interpreted could be different. CHIRP is very flexible as to sorting. When you're looking at those tables, you can sort it by receive frequency, channel number, frequency name, alphabetical, title, and it does support cut and paste. Like I say, cut and paste is about the best feature, because a lot of these manufacturing softwares, they don't have Windows capable cut and paste and stuff. You can insert rows, you can delete rows, you can highlight a block, move blocks up and down. You can do some damage if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. But in the long run, that's all about flexibility and versatility, and it's a good feature. It comes in handy once you get a little more familiar with it. Well, that's what I said. It lets you insert and delete line by line, or it's a highlighted block. For the price, CHIRP is the best on the market. It's technically free, okay? You just got to download it, although they won't gripe if you make a PayPal donation. Make sure after you do every adjustment, look back to what you just did to make sure none of your settings appear to have jumped or changed. It can be that quick. And as we already said, the worst offenders are in the tone column, the CTCSS tone columns, such as if you switch the frequency from TSQL back to tone, that line may throw the TSQL tone out and change it back to, well, it's supposed to be 88.5, but it'll change it back to the 88 space holder, okay? And then if you go back and change it, you don't catch it, you're still off. So it will not readjust your original entry. It may actually change the tone column to cross. Okay, this is like I said, simple like brain surgery. These are some of the things that we have found out because we waded off into it cold. And once we figured out that we thought we were doing everything correct and knew it wasn't anything we were doing, we started looking at the software and we saw what it was doing. And I'm gonna be honest, the software was correct. It was right. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I'm the idiot bouncing around back and forth, changing things without knowing what I'm doing, thinking what I just did is going to stay like I wanted it to. But the frequency, the software knows once I make that selection, something else has to change, and it changes it for me. So I don't get mad at the software. I did get mad at a few drivers and a few programming cables because of the stand on one foot and pat your tummy thing as to how you got the computer to eat the drivers. But the software itself, it's my best friend now that I know what I was doing and what it can do. So any questions, comments, or concerns?
Well, I'll mention that there is an alternative for many radios. It's called RT Systems, but it's expensive. It'll be $30, $40 for a radio. So when you have multiple radios, it gets expensive fast, but it also works very well. So I made use of that. So it's called RT Systems. But to save yourself some money, probably your first stop could be CHIRP, and chances are you'll be successful with it.
And that's one of the things I don't understand. CHIRP's got D-Star capability. That's a digital subset on the ICOMs. Ashley gets the privilege of modifying his 2200H with CHIRP under D-Star. Me and my 5100 do not.
No.
So I had to go.
Yeah.
I had to go get that RT Systems. It was
Yeah.
like $45 online, but it did come with the cable. So they'll give you the right cable that's going to have the right driver that their software needs. You just plug it in the specific order they tell you, and that aspect is going to be bulletproof. And realistically, the RT Systems is very, very similar to the CHIRP format. So that's two of the most familiar ones that I've seen so far. Anybody else? Questions? Comment?
Well, we'll tell y'all there's other, after you get your radio set up and all that stuff, there's another tab. I know we're stuck on this window right here. There's another tab, settings. And it's like an advanced tab. You can go change some other stuff like your message, like when it powers up, your
the call signs and all that.
Yeah, your backlight, your transmit, receive, and standby, the color of your lights, depending on your radio. If I could if I could have figured out how to do this before, I should have had this up better. I did not know, but there's so much more to it on the back end of it after you get your frequency set up to go get your radio set up.
That would be a good thing for CHIRP take too, is after they get a little familiarity with the CHIRP itself, then we can go back in, because every radio is going to be different. It's going to have different options. But.
And then when you're scanning, a lot of times it's set up where it scans. If you don't have it set up to CO, it's going to stay on that channel. When it stops, when it feels a pulse of a signal, it'll stop. But when the carrier operation drops, if you don't tell it, when you don't hear anything on that channel, start scanning again. You have to go tell it to do that. Otherwise, it's just going to stay on that channel, and you're going to sit there and go, wow, my channel's not
scanning. Things are quiet.
Yeah, we're quiet. So you have to actually go tell it to do this. You have to go tell it to, when the carrier operation drops, start scanning again if you have a dual band. Like on my Bofang, I'll have one channel on A, and then on B, I'll scan. There's nothing going on A channel, but it's going to scan everything on B. It picks something up, and when it doesn't hear anything for 15 seconds, it'll continue on scanning. But you have to go tell it to do that. So there's more to programming the CHIRP, other than getting their frequencies and getting the tones and all that set up. There's other things embedded inside the radio that you need to go set up and do to enjoy a dual band radio.
And I'll go ahead and admit, I was one of the ones that inadvertently set the weather channels to scan. So I would get one pass, and it would lock on the first weather repeater, and I would tell it to go by, and to go to the next one. Yeah. So
it stay right there.
Well, it's because I was thinking, to me, I figure if you want it to scan, you put the S in the column. Okay. No, with them, it's if you want it skipped, you put the S in the column. Depends on the radio.
That's the way I set like my radio's up, and Jimmy, I set yours up. You got the weather channel, it just won't scan it. You have to arrow to it to listen to it. That way it won't stop on it and stay on it, because once it feels that pulse, because the weather channel, it's always pulsing. It does not shut up. There's always something on it.
All this programming necessary for anything other than 2 meters and 70 centimeters?
No, you can use CHIRP for everything.
Yeah, because on my QB25, it covers 4 bands. You know, some of the frequencies, one was 3 1/4, the other was like 222. Same thing. You get in there and you set them up on those frequencies. Most of those are going to be simplex, where you're just going point to point to another unit that's in that same band. Aren't a whole lot of 222 repeaters around here. I think there might be one in the north end of the state, but yeah, you're going to pretty much use the same theory and the same format for whatever band you're on, with the exception of HF. Yeah, I haven't seen too many HF radios covered in CHIRP.
I meant like 10 meters and 20 meters and that kind of stuff, where you don't have to program your radios for that.
If the radio will do it, you can. Yeah.
Well, usually with a HF radio, you can just tune, change your bands, change your mode, dial, adjust your VFO to what you want to listen to. Then you can talk, because it's not channelized. So usually on HF, you don't have to program your radio, except you might want to have a list of memories for nets and popular things like that. So it's not as mandatory as it is for the channelized world of 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and so forth. So,
well, I've seen some of those Zwagos and Zugos and stuff. Radio Oddity's got one they've set out for about $500. I see it, and it's supposed to be an HF rig on certain conditions. It might be one of the ones CHIRP will talk to. I don't know. I've never had that particular radio.
I don't really know. CHIRP may be helpful with some HF radios, but I've never really had a need for it. So
no.
Yeah.
Well, there for a while, I didn't have a need for it either. And I was going to skip a laptop across the driveway like once.
So that was when you were trying to change computers.
Back in the old days.
Do what, Lou? Or who said that?
That was Jimmy.
Oh,
I don't know how they got along without computers back in the old days.
It
I
was
wouldn't have made it.
ugly.
Well,
It was ugly.
in part, you used to have a crystal that you would plug in for every channel, and you could switch between crystals. So that was a different way to program a radio.
I would have shot something.
Well, I tell people that, there's radios are great, computers are great, but sometimes we get computers and radios together. It can be frustrating.
I will tell you, I can't remember the brand name, but one of my first HTs had like a half dozen thumb wheels on the top. You had to have the battery door off, not the battery out, but the battery door off. And you would set the frequency up in that area, and you would have to hit almost like a smart button in the back for about 3 seconds to commit that to the channel memory.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, I wish I could remember the name of that radio, but it was miserable to work with, and getting the tones right. Oh, Lord help me. Yeah, it was ugly.
Actually, there's older radios that don't even have a tone. So they're not very useful today, but
No.
Some very old radios don't have tone, but we had some workaround for it. And well,
Well,
this
guys,
point,
I have to check out because
right.
it comes early.
Well, let me thank Botz for putting this all together, and hopefully
Yeah, Botz.
you won't need
hopefully
everything that Botz said till you become a power user, but it's things to watch out for when you get started. And if nothing else, we now know if you have problems,
Call
Always
Botz.
better to
Botz
put it
or
back.
Ashley?
No, call Botz.
Always be prepared to put it back like it was before you started tinkering.
Okay.
That's the best piece of advice I can give you.
Call Botz, BR549.
All right. All right.
All right, guys. Hey,